Rise and shine, everybody. Welcome back, grade 8. As you can see, I have some magnetics again, and what you're seeing here is the Cartesian coordinates, and it's not necessary to use Cartesian coordinates to do the next little bit. So before I go into this, let's talk about what we're doing today. Okay, so we started chapter 8, which is talking about, so we've been doing the geometry section of our math 8. Okay, so we finished linear equations and we did surface areas, volumes of 3D objects. So, and we drew nets. And now we're moving on to transformations. So in the beginning of the chapter, we talked about different views, so views of objects, and we looked at different ways of seeing things. Like when we're in front of a building, we don't see all sides of the building, and we don't see the top of the building. We only see where we're standing, the side we can see. So that's the kind of thing we did in the first 3 sections of this chapter. Now we're starting something called transformations. Before we move into this, you need to know some of the terminology here. So I'm going to work backwards. And this is my 5th attempt. My video shut down 19 minutes into it, and I guess it was time to back up some of my pictures, and I have so many pictures of my kids on my phone, so I had to do that first before I could do the take 5, you can say. Okay, so hopefully I can finish it in this time. I can finish it and not have to restart. Okay, so we're going to talk about something called translation. Okay, translation, just moving an object, let's say the square, to right certain spots and up or down or left. So this is kind of like plotting points, and that's part of the reason why I drew Cartesian coordinates, because we just covered that recently. I'd rather you practice with that. The more you practice with a new concept, the easier it becomes for you, the longer you're going to remember, so you don't have to relearn this in Math 9. Okay, so that's one purpose, but you don't have to do this on Cartesian coordinates. As you can see in your textbook, they use dot paper. You can use grid paper, but please don't send your parents out to buy you grid paper or dot paper. As you can see, I'm not using any of that. You can use a clear sheet of paper. You just have to use a ruler. And I don't even have a ruler. All the rulers we had are still sitting in the windowsill, so I use this paper. So you can improvise. You can make do with what you have. All the rulers we had, they're still sitting in our windowsill in our classroom. And when you're trying to pack up and leave, it's impossible to pack everything. So, and I can't keep going back for things that I missed. So I improvise. You've seen me do that multiple times, I'm sure. You don't need to stop learning just because you don't have a certain material. Okay, you improvise. Okay, so translation is just that. So you're moving it around. So it's, instead of having a point that you plot, go right this many and go up this many spaces or centimeters or whatever measurements you might be using and plot a point. But this time you have a shape. So you can have a square, you can have a triangle, could be anything. So that's translation. Second term is reflection. So you did this in science recently. We did a lab where you looked at writing in the mirror and you looked at yourself, so your image is flipped. So another term you need to, so you're going to do something similar for math. Okay? So that will kind of reinforce the concept again. I like that when math and science kind of talk about the same stuff. It will happen next year again. You'll learn slopes and stuff, and you'll do the same thing in science and math. So that helps, I think, understand the concept a little bit deeper when you're learning the same thing in 2 different subject matter. Okay, so the thing you need to remember here is the line of reflection. So when you're looking in a mirror, the base of the mirror where your reflection starts is the line of the reflection. Okay, so that's another term you need to remember. So translation, reflection, line of reflection, and the last one is a rotation. So you're rotating something certain degrees. As you can see here, D has been rotated to this shaded area. So either you can rotate D 180 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. So you can get to the same spot whether you rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. And this time, this line is firmly placed, so that line does not move when your image flips, reflects. Okay, so here the point is firmly placed, or you can say that's a permanent, constant point. That point must not move. You have to rotate the shape around that point. Okay, so the point of rotation. So I'm going to start with the point of rotation, then line of reflection, and kind of work backwards. Okay, so let's start with this. I will try not to make such a long video this time. After trying it, 5 times, it should be easier, you would think. Okay, so I drew this. The reason it's taped is because I want to have a firm point. Okay, so this is my point. My point is the origin, okay, where the two axes, the X and Y axis, they meet here. So that's where I'm firmly placing this, and I put a tape because otherwise the shape moves really easily. Okay, so as you can see, I tried to kind of align it. So when you see this, when it rotates, it should align with this axis. So I'm going to move this 90 degrees. Okay, it's not as easy because my tape kind of doesn't work as well. Okay, so I'm going to try to firmly pull my tape so then it's right there. Okay, so I'm going to draw the inside because the outside is a little bit difficult to draw. So I'm going to label that B. Okay, so now this way is clockwise. Okay, so now I can say A has been rotated 90 degrees clockwise to get to B. Okay, or you can say B as a 90-degree clockwise rotation of A. Okay, but I can go in the other direction and get to the same spot. Okay, so now this direction I would say, okay, I'm not going to draw all over it because I want to reuse the paper for other parts. So other direction, you can also say A or B is 270 degree counterclockwise. That's a long word right there. Counterclockwise rotation. Okay, so you have to, when you're explaining this, you need to make 3 points. So B is, okay, 270 degree clockwise rotation of A. So you need to tell me the starting point, what the rotation is, clockwise or counterclockwise attached to the degrees, and then where it ends up being. So I need A and a B, and what the clockwise or counterclockwise rotation is in degrees. Okay, so there's multiple ways of doing this. Now I'm going to put this back here. I think I got flipped a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to move it in the other direction now. Okay, so let's say it's here and I move it here. I'm only going to do 90 degrees because it's a little bit easier to play with. Okay, and I want you to get a good grasp of this concept. Whoopsies. Okay, so we're not going to get complicated right now. Okay, so it's not working as well as the first couple times, so bear with me. So I'm going to label this C. So this is again 90 degrees clockwise. Okay, so 90 degree clockwise rotation of A. Okay, or you can say 270 degree, sorry, that was counterclockwise. Counterclockwise rotation, and you can also say it's 270 degree clockwise rotation of A. Okay, so that's rotation. Okay, let's talk about reflections. I'm going to try to draw it here, a new triangle, and I'm going to scribble inside, and it's a lot easier to scribble, and especially when you have a toddler at home, you'll see that quite often. So means I start doing it too. Alright, so this is my line. My y-axis is going to be my line of reflection. Okay, so pretend that you're standing here and that's your mirror. So your image is going to get flipped to this side. Okay, so I'm going to draw another image. and scribble inside so I can see it clearly. Comparing. Okay, so now this can be my image E, and that's my image F right there. Okay, so I can say F is a reflection of E over the Y, line of reflection Y. Okay, or it doesn't have to be just the Y-axis or X-axis. Okay, I can draw any line I want. Okay, so I'm going to draw a random line right here. Okay, and my handy dandy ruler here. Okay, so I'm going to label this line L. Okay, everything must be labeled. It's easier to talk about stuff in this label rather than saying the red one or the blue one, right? Because there's two blue lines. So I might be like, well, which one? Okay, so make sure you're clearly labeling everything. So I'm going to draw a new shape right here. I'm not going to shade it in, and I'm going to reflect it over this line. Okay, okay. So this is, I'm going to take this tape off so it's easier to work with a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to do this. Okay, so now this is my A and that's my B. Okay, or you can label it anything you want. It doesn't have to be A, B, or X, Y. Okay, so now my A, you can say my B is a reflection of A, or you can say A is being reflected to B over the line of reflection L. Okay, sometimes, most of the time actually, we label these. We go A, B, and C. So my A here is being reflected right here. Okay, my C is being reflected here, and my B is the other end. Okay, so now I would say my triangle. So if you don't understand this notation, that's okay. When you're doing a lot of math, you learn to use shortcuts so you're not writing a lot. Okay, so my triangle, all that means is my triangle A, B, and C. So I'm going to label this the same. So I can say my triangle ABC. That probably makes no sense whatsoever. Okay, so I'm going to actually do D, E, and F. So I'll change the labels of this one. So I can say my triangle ABC right here is being reflected over the line of reflection L. Okay, so as long as you're showing me what's being reflected where and which line is the line of reflection, that's all you need to kind of show. Okay, so that is, we did a rotation, we did a reflection. So now we're going to talk about translation. Okay, so I'm going to use a square just so we're using something different, and I'm going to use a black pen. Okay, so I'm going to try to kind of draw this. Okay, so now this is where my square is. Okay, so I will label this W. Okay, so my square W. So when we're talking about translations, we're just moving them, just like you would move a point. So let's pretend that this is your point that you plotted. So this is, as you can see, I didn't label them -1, -2, -3, and so on, because when you're doing translations, it doesn't matter. You're just counting left, right, up, or down. Okay, so you can use up. You can write up, or you can write U. Okay, I'm completely okay with either. If you use down, okay, you can write down, or you can write D. Okay, the right, same way, right, or you can use R, and left, you use L. Okay, so I'm going to use U, D, R, and L. Okay, so just for to kind of show you what's going on and how you use notation. Okay, so I'm going to pretend this is the only point I'm looking at, and I want to move this point, let's say 3 right and 2 up. Okay, so that's right and up. Okay, so I want this point going 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's one translation. So if I was to draw it right here, okay, so I'll put that here. So that's just one translation. Okay, so that's my, let's say, call it P. Okay, so that's 3 to the right. So that's his translation still. It doesn't have to do both. So now I want to go up 2. So up 1 and 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a ruler now. Okay, just to kind of align it. Okay, so this is where my point is going to be. So I moved 1 and 2 up. So now my new square, I'm going to use a Sharpie to kind of show where that goes. I need to take out more markers. My daughter used mine and left them open and they're dried out. Okay, so now I need to open a new package. Okay, so let's call this a Q. Okay, so you can say P is a translation of W, 3 to the right. Oh, I forgot to write a T there. You can see why I use U, D, R, and L. Okay, so now, or I can say Q is a translation of W, 3 to the right and 2 up. Or you can say Q is a translation of P, 2 up. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so now you know how to do rotation. Okay, so it could be clockwise or counterclockwise. It could be 90 degrees, it could be 180 degrees, it can be 270, you can do 45 if you want, it doesn't matter, as long as when you're playing around with it, start simple. Always start simple. You get too complicated and then you kind of lose the concept. Okay, so the most important thing here is getting the concept. Okay, what angle you use doesn't really matter. Okay, so I will work with mostly 90s, 180 and 270. Okay, so the second thing you learned is over the line of reflection. So you reflected this over here. Okay, so this A was reflected here, and then that shaded in triangle was reflected over the y-axis, and then this A was reflected over to B over here. Okay, so play around with that, and then translation. So those are the 3 things we're going to do in translations. Okay, and you will have a short project creating a design that uses rotations and translations and reflections and all of them, and pick a shape, and then you're going to rotate it and draw, and they may overlap at times and they may not. So that's another thing actually I want to go over quickly before I end this. So as you can see, what if my square here was kind of overlining the axis? So let's say it's overlapping on the x axis and I want to reflect it over I want to use my x-axis also as my line of reflection. So what's going to happen here? So I'm going to draw this in black. Okay, so now this point I'm going to label them, and I'm going to call them A, B, and C, and D. Okay, so now when I reflect, okay, so this is kind of roughly, you can see it's pretty close to 2, so it's going to go up pretty close to 2. Okay, so my line, so my B is going to end up kind of here. Okay, so I'm going to use, so my B is going to end up there. Okay, now my A is kind of, so if you kind of eyeball it, it's kind of half, so this will go halfway up. Okay, and so I have to kind of align it vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to kind of do a dotted line here, or just kind of light faint line over here, and then I want to see how much of this. Okay, so my handy dandy ruler here. Okay, so this is where my A is going to end up. Okay, now my C is going to be at kind of a similar scale here. So it's vertically is about the same level as A, but as you can see, it's right there. Okay, so my C is right here. Okay, so now I'm going to connect those, just kind of using the square. Okay, and I'm going to draw the whole shape in. And then I want you to notice where, so I have A, B, and C, and my D is right here. Okay, so one thing you need to really notice is if you focus at that blue line right here, okay, this shape, whatever was on the top, okay, so that was just a little square with an edge cut off, okay, reflected this way. But the piece that was kind of above that x-axis is this piece right here. Okay. Okay. So as you can see, this reflected this way. So my D ended up being, so it's kind of like you're reflecting two mirrors into each other. So one's going to reflect whatever's in mirror 1 is going to reflect into mirror 2, and the part that's in mirror 2 will reflect into mirror 1, if that makes any sense. So play around with it, okay? So you're going to understand this concept a lot better if you use some visuals and use some hands-on. You don't have to redraw everything. What I would recommend, if you don't have anything like this, any kind of toys at home, cut out a square from cardboard or this very bright construction paper, or it's like a poster board, or even cereal box. Cut out a bunch of shapes and use them like I used these magnets, and play around and figure out how you rotate things, and how do you do reflections, and how do you do translation. And those are the 3 things we're going to do. Once we finish with this, we'll move on to tessellations. All right, take care, and I will talk to you next time.